Hello, hello, Aderson Oliveira here for the DNN store. Today I have with me Peter Donker. He is the CEO, the owner of Bring to Mind. Bring to Mind is the creator, and Peter as well as are creators of the famous DMX module, which is a document management solution for DNN. Not only that, but Peter is also a DNN MVP. He is the president of an organization called DNN-Connect, which we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And he is now a book author as well for the professional DNN-7 book that just came out. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Addison. I'm very pleased to see you again. We met once before in the flesh, I believe, in 2008 or 9 or you know, it could be a bit later even, but yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Peter. So yeah, I think it was the first one in Orlando. We had the pleasure to share a car together and a car ride together as well. Okay, so where are you based? That's the first one.
Yeah, I'm based in Switzerland, Western Switzerland, right next to a region what the locals like to call Watch Valley, much like a rip-off of Silicon Valley. It's where all the fancy Swiss watches are being made, and I'm right next to that region.
I've heard some people commenting that you have a very nice scenery, you know, a very nice landscape out there, you know.
Yeah, I do my best on social media to share the view that I have. We bought a house actually on top of the mountain, so we actually overlook the wider area, and of course, you know, one of the reasons we could do that is that I work from home. I have my home office. As you can see, a home office, as so many home offices, is full of books and PCs and broken stuff. So at any moment the door could open and someone could pop in and say, "Can you fix this?" That's you know, and on top of a mountain. So I like posting pictures of the view we have, and I've had quite some positive feedback on those images.
Very good, very good. Okay, so I'm not gonna ask about your history of DNN. I saw an interview that you have done a few years ago with Chris for one of the DNN events that you were a speaker. So I'm not gonna go on that route, but I'm gonna ask about DMX itself. And when did you first release DMX?
Good question. 2004, I believe, was the first version. I think in end of 2002, beginning 2003. Throughout 2003, I basically got up to speed with DNN. Started my first foray into tiny modules, see if they would sell, doing something really simple. And then during that year I decided I was going to sink my teeth into something big, which was document management, which until that time had not been tackled yet on the platform.
Okay, but why document management? There must be a reason why that one.
Yes, why that one? Interestingly enough, in 2000, so 2002, 2003, I was asked by a neighbor who works for a company in the region to look at if I could do their intranet, and I found it incredibly interesting that he would ask me, first of all, and secondly, you know, how to pursue this challenge. I'd done an intranet for a smaller company, but this was much larger, and in doing so I stumbled on DNN, and you know, I said, oh wow, you know, this nails basically 80% of what these guys were after. So all of a sudden I felt very comfortable going into the presentation, said, look, you know, it's going to be actually not as expensive as you might think, etc. But there was a couple of boxes I needed to tick, right, for them. So going through, you know, the list of requirements, things that we're looking at, what they were looking for, one of those things, of course, was document management for their intranet. And as I was, you know, scouring the ecosystem, so what had been made, and you know, how could you piece this together? I mean, I found that that was just not there. And it was something that was quite central in the organization I had worked at before. So yeah, then you know, I was like, well, that doesn't seem to be, you know, to me like rocket science, let's try and make something similar. And since then, you know, things have obviously taken off.
Okay, that explains why, but it does not explain why the single focus, okay, it's not about just that. I was about to say just that, not just, don't take that as detrimental, but why the single focus, as we see so many people going into so many, I don't know, maybe so many different directions or so many different modules, why the single focus?
I think that kind of grew, like right from the start, quite quickly I managed to capture that niche, right? I was like, okay, well, you know, document management, Peter, you know, need to be, bring to mind, just stuck a label on it, bring to mind. And the activities I developed next to it were mostly related to that, and not for nothing, because I feel that if you're going to get into some kind of a market like this, you need to have some kind of focus. If you're trying to do everything, you probably end up doing a lot of things not that good. Instead, you know, try to do one thing and just really do it well. Of course, you're working with customers who have real issues and have real demands who are coming at you, and it's extremely interesting to take those and see if you can do them in a central module, or if you do them in a you know, something that you add to it. If you like extensions to the module, I quickly made it like an extendable, kind of like a mini framework for document management, and that way I could build out a whole little kind of industry around this document management thing. But of course, the most important thing for me was, you know, stay focused. I think that is actually, you know, I would advise anyone to do that in their business.
You know, I have to say that whenever a client or a contact of mine, they need something related to document management, I don't have a second thought, and I say naturally, it comes out of, I mean, it rolls out of my mouth. DMX. There's no option there aside from DMX. So again, you were very successful on that aspect. I mean, the solo focus really rewarded you with a great module, and again, you are rewarded for your single-minded focus. Now, I'm assuming that that's your the core part of your business, but from that module, I'm assuming that comes out of a lot of work as well, because my next question is really, are you solely focused on DNN? Are you solely focused on your module? What else do you offer? Tell me a little bit.
Yes. Okay. So yes. First of all, to answer your question, solely DNN. Yes, that's still my edge. I know a lot about DNN, and I feel that I would be watering down my efforts on DNN if I start venturing into other platforms. I would say for designers, this is maybe easier to go to other platforms. For developers, you really invest heavily in the API that is there, and it's so much better to just invest in that and stay focused again on what it is that you do well. Now, the second aspect, like, okay, so what actually is the scala of things that, you know, the palette of things that I offer? So I have, on the one hand, there's the sale, right? It's the sales of the module. The module comes as is, and it already does a whole bunch of things. And of course, the second penchant would be services, right? So someone comes along and says, oh, by the way, you know, great module, but, you know, I needed to do this. And from the start, I mean, that's also why I created the module as a little framework, and I kept tinkering so that I could make it extensible. That was, you know, taking in all those custom jobs and making some pretty nifty applications, if you like. I will name one that's kind of a nice illustration, I think. The Wildlife Conservation Society is a nature organization based in New York, but it's a worldwide operation involved in conservation. And they have biologists spread around the globe who make observations. Now, I've been working for this organization almost since I started DMX. I mean, I think right from 2004 or something like that. I've always had jobs with them on and off. But one of the applications quite interesting actually is biologists would run off into the jungle, if you like. I'm probably spicing this up a little bit in terms of what their job is, but they would run off into the jungle and start, like, oh, I see this bird here and I see this bird there, or they would find a dead bird and try to determine the cause of death, and they would note that on their laptop in an Excel sheet. And the thing is that their internet connection is so flaky that they can't really be expected to go online and enter into forms that we make, that we could make, the results of their work. So instead, what we made was a system whereby they would take that Excel sheet, put it in an email as an attachment, and send it to a particular email address. Now, then DMX would come, or the extension that I made anyway, would take that email, extract the Excel sheet out of that, and through, let's say some kind of a language that we defined that they could then tweak, the Excel data gets processed and gets stuck into SQL. And that allows WCS to gather data from all around the globe about things like avian flu, that kind of stuff. And DNN and DMX plays an integral part in that. So.
Very good. Actually, you covered a lot of my questions right there, So whenever I hit some of those, I'm going to say, oh, you answered that one right there. But that's great. That's great. That's fine. So I'm gonna ask you a question that sounds trivial or obvious, but and it might be, but I'm gonna ask anyway. So what is the most common use case of DMX? I mean, is that for people to share documents outside of the company, inside the company, privately with clients? What can you tell?
Right. So the like the 99% or the 95% use case is simply an intranet from a company to share documents within and outside of the company. Obviously, this is a market that has seen quite a bit of competition from the likes of Dropbox, but of course DMX still has the advantage that it's deeply wired into DNN. In other words, if you already have a DNN intranet set up, DMX will make sure it takes the whole DNN authentication model. So your users, your roles, etc. Everything gets transferred to DMX as well. So that makes it a very powerful document sharing option for companies who say, well, we want to be able to make some content available outside. I will name here another use case. One of Holland's larger architecture offices is called Meccano. They make some great buildings all over the globe. They were lauded in last year for their public library in Birmingham. That is the largest public library at the moment in Europe, I believe. But they're doing projects in Boston, in Taiwan, and a lot of projects in Holland as well. But especially for those international projects, of course, document management becomes a more pressing issue, right? So they now have offices in, I believe, 4 or 5 locations, and the old model of like, well, stick it on the network drive starts to run into into his boundaries. And so this is where at one point, you know, we also said, okay, well, let's stick DMX in there. And yeah, for a whole bunch of projects, even projects locally in Holland now, you know, being used to exchange data between the architect, between the engineers, between the client, etc. So all the people involved with the project.
Perfect. Okay, so when I see on the DNN store, I see two versions of DMX. I see something that you call the DMX Lite. What is basically the main difference between the Lite and the full-fledged version of DMX?
Yeah, like, you know, our industry, software industry, always has you know, this flux of and this terminologies that you keep seeing keep coming back. So Lite is one of those things. I wanted to differentiate the product because with $250 for the, you know, for the main product, it was you know, let's say in the upper segment of the DNN store market. I'm very happy that over the years now I've seen other modules that have joined this segment, and even, you know, there's quite a few that have passed largely the $250 mark. But still, there's a sizable market underneath, and regularly I would get a request from someone who said, hey, don't you have anything cheaper? And I would say, well, you know, I don't want to dilute my product, right? I don't want to dilute my attention. But what I can offer you is the previous version, right, an old version that I kind of maintain and I kind of mothballed, and, you know, we'll call that Lite. I've stripped out anything that would give me a headache in terms of support. So it's pretty darn sure to work, DMX Lite. It's a fairly simple, straightforward module, but it does some things very well, like the main product. It does secure your documents quite well, but it doesn't have all the features. So there's no search, there's no, you know, very little notifications. And it doesn't have a fancy interface like the Pro version does. The Lite version comes with a perpetual license, just like the Pro product, but there's no activation either. It's basically very much a hands-off affair. It's like, okay, well, here you go, you know, have fun with it. That product costs $99. The main product is $250.
Okay, that makes sense. At some point at the beginning, I mentioned that the first thing that comes to mind when a client or a contact talks about document management, I think about DMX, and I don't see much competition out there in the DNN space on document management. I see some other players, but very small players. I don't know. I don't see relevant players there in the document management space on the DNN, you know, ecosystem. What do you attribute to that? Is that because it's a complex solution to be implemented? I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, in part there is. I mean, there used to be a competitor, right? And they've been bought by DNN Corp. DNN Corp was faced with a choice because they after 2008, when they developed the professional version of DNN, they had to also roll in a better solution for document management. So they came knocking on my door, they came knocking on the other guy's door, and long story short, you know, they bought the other guys, took the product off the market, and again, after a brief period of a couple of years where they were in the market, again, I was more or less on my own. I think, well, later, actually, I spoke to the competitor at a conference, and you know, he confided to me that for him it was very hard to make the numbers work. Right, so I think his product was 175, if I remember correctly, and you know, like he said, it was very difficult to keep this company running on something that only cost 175, and I could totally understand that, because with 250, yeah, you know, I don't need to look for work, if you like, right? It's a sustainable business. 175, I doubt that that would work. So that means that if you're going to attack that market, you're going to have a product which is worth, you know, that amount of money. And given that it is fairly complex to make something like this, and two, the market is not that huge. You know, let's be honest. I mean, DNN is not WordPress, so you know, you're not going to sell millions of these. It's not the Apple App Store. So yeah, if you do the numbers, that is very hard to tackle right now. Maybe if DNN all of a sudden starts taking off again, and we start reaching very, very serious numbers, we might see someone who will make the investment to try and edge into this market as well. I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying to, how shall I say, not abuse my position. At the same time, you know, okay, this is the way it is. Of course, it's quite comfortable for me the way it is.
Very good, very good for you. And yeah, I mean, it's described very well. It's not an easy space to make a full living out of it. But anyway, let's talk about Evoq certification, because I don't see yours Evoq certified yet with the stamp. What needs to be done there to jump that? One of my roles here is also to push people to go and certify. But yeah, tell me.
You know, it's obviously not my market. Evoq, I have sold a couple of my clients are on Evoq, but it's not a major segment of my market, because, as I mentioned before, the professional edition then rolled in their own professional document management solution. For Evoq, they've ramped that up and they've turned it into something that was actually quite, I think, quite nice. It will do some other things. It has a different philosophy than DMX, which means that I still sell a few of my DMXs into that market, because, you know, some people are really like some of the decisions I've made around my product. But for the most part, Evoq will tackle also that 95% use case that we talked about earlier. So that is in a nutshell why Evoq certification is not high on my agenda.
Okay, that explains. The next point here, I think that you tackled that, but you tell me if you did that already. The most unusual case, the most unusual use case for DMX, was that the one that described at the beginning, that they have to email the document? Is that the most unusual one?
Yeah, it's probably I would say the one that I find the most striking as well. I mean, it required a lot of little bits and pieces to fit together. You know, you need your obviously your email connector, you know, reading out emails and being able to extract the document from it. You know, a part of it was an Excel component. Open up an Excel sheet, be able to read the contents, and another part, of course, was designing some kind of a language that we could understand, that they could manage, to say, okay, well, you know, this cell goes there and this cell goes there, etc., for a query. It is definitely, you know, if I think back on it, it's probably the most advanced case I've tackled in my.
Very good. I want to get that website address just to put in the notes here.
But you can't see it. It's not public.
Very true. I see. Most of it.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I understand. Some modules are most for backend usage, and what you're saying is that this is one of those cases, isn't it?
Yeah. When you sent me an email earlier on saying, hey, you know, can you maybe send us some links of where we can see your module in action? Again, it's not the first time that I have that question, and unfortunately the answer is always simple. Like, you know, my clients by and large have this on pages that you can't see unless you can log in.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. So I'm gonna go through two very standard questions here. One is, how frequently do you create new releases? Do you publish? And which process do you go through to know what you're gonna include in the next release?
Okay, yeah, interesting question. So my response to that is this, that I take a somewhat conservative approach to rolling out new features. I think, again, you stay focused on what you think you do well, given also the feedback of users. Of course, if there's a significant amount of demand for a specific feature, it will get added to the system. But most of the time, I mean, every now and then some user, some customer will come up and say, hey, how about it works this way? And yeah, you have to use your own bit of your sense in that to say, okay, is this going to be something that every single customer out there is going to enjoy or not? So I'm not dismissive out of hand, but at the same time, I'm fairly conservative because I have a fairly large user base right now. So it's not like if you just have, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 customers that you can risk something. Now there's in the 4 figures, thousands of users. And yeah, if I change something, everyone gets impacted. So you don't want to rock the boat. So that's one side of that. So that means that I don't radically overhaul the product every year. And but what I do is, so on regular intervals, try to get bug fix releases out there. So one of the things that I criticize DNN for sometimes is that I feel what we miss is a 7.1.8 release, something like that. In other words, have a really stable release with many bug fix releases, so that after a while people are like, wow, okay, this thing now is just rock solid with the features that were in 6.1. Right. So currently I'm on 6.1.11, meaning the 11th iteration of the 6.1 release, and yeah, it's pretty stable as a module. Very few quirks, etc. In terms of support, very manageable module. So when is the next version coming? I can't tell. I have a couple of things up my sleeve. I just want to tweak a few things. In terms of a major revision, which would probably prompt me to actually make it a version 7 instead of a 6, is a revision of the UI. But one of the things that's holding me back right now is that so much is unclear at the moment within DNN of where things are going. And I think people tend to underestimate how far back the installations go that my customers are on. So it's not uncommon for me to get someone with a DNN4 installation asking for, will your latest product run on that? And I will have to politely tell them that it requires at least DNN6. Now, very few people run absolutely the latest release of DNN, and this is of course something that as a module developer, as someone who's in the DNN store, you're very well aware of, and that's something that you have to live with. Is your module needs to be compiled against something that goes sufficiently far back to cover a larger part of our market. So that actually does hold us back a little bit. There have been a lot of changes in DNN over the past few years, but people have not followed up on actually installing those versions. So when people say, hey, why don't you hook into the latest search engine, for instance, of DNN, my reply would be, I'd love to, but it's too new. still. The services framework wasn't stable until 7.1.2. I'd love to leverage that as well, and I've been doing a lot of like side projects in little open source modules to test my skills in that. But you know, once the floodgates open, yeah, then we can think about a major upgrade.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm almost done talking about the product itself, and I want to dive into some other aspects of your participation in the DNN space. I know that you have a website there up. Is there anything that you want to demonstrate, that you want to show before I move on?
Yeah, sure. I'll just show briefly. Let me just start it up. Yeah, there you go. It's up, I guess. You can see it. All right. So yeah, just I mean, one of the core philosophies of the module is the fact that it is a lot like Windows Explorer, something that we're all familiar with, and that's one of the things I would also tell any prospective client. I'm like, look, your users are fairly familiar with this approach to how you manage files and folders. So if you have a folder and you say, well, you know, this is my first folder, and you assign it some permissions. So okay, well, this is only visible to management or to registered users. What the hell? We'll do that. An update, and we go into that folder. There's nothing there yet. I'm just going to import some stuff that I have on disk, so it will give us at least some content to work with. And temp. Just test the access. I can read that. Okay. That's just going to import a couple of PDFs and JPEGs, etc. And we'll see some of the core pictures. Core features. There you go. Almost done.
So you can use DMX to manage any I guess any format of document, isn't it? It doesn't matter too much, is it?
It actually is totally agnostic of it. It doesn't care. It has no clue about what document format there is. Each document has a specific key as to what type it is, and that type key can then be used in the code to do different things if need be. And even folders and files actually sit in at the same level in the product, which is one of the distinctions between this product and, for instance, what DNN rolls out. So DMX was always set up to be a highly extensible framework, so I could make a completely new type of folder, if you like, or a new type of file of any kind. And for pictures, for instance, you know, there's the here you can see the little float over at a thumbnail generation, but more importantly, of course, you need to be able to search your content, right? So if I search for DNN, it should show me a couple of PDFs that have now been indexed, and then I should be able to actually view as well and just show inline. So these things, it makes the interface, this is the interface that resembles a lot what people are used to on their PC, but because quite often what we want to do is we actually want to manage content with an interface like this, but we don't necessarily want to present it to end users like that. So what DMX actually does is it shares its content across the whole portal. So now, and the way so if I add another DMX, what happens is it will show exactly the same content, as you can see, as the first page. But what I can actually do is I could say, well, actually what I want to do is I want to have it start in a different folder here, right? And so all of a sudden, everything that's higher up, right now it's just the first folder that shows, right? Everything that's higher up is now shielded away from us. And then I could say, well, actually, I don't want the whole Explorer interface, and I just want a different interface. Instead of this one, I'm going to go for the templated view. And for the templated view, I'm going to go for the minimal view of this. I say, okay, update. And now this is basically an HTML template of the content that comes out of DMX. And users can still, go around and find documents and download them. This should just like if
I love the templating capabilities of DMX. I have to tell you.
That's and these templates are extremely simple. These are token replace templates. So people who want to do very advanced skinning stuff, you could do whatever you want with these templates, or quite a bit. You can't get the full richness of these context menus coming up, etc. But for, let's say, for distribution of your content, it's ideal. And I would get, one of my FAQs is your module responsive? And as you can see, the answer is quite complex, because on the one hand, no, this thing is not designed to be used on small screens. But then again, you probably would not manage your content from your iPad in this way. You might delete some pictures, but your iPad does not have a hard drive to upload stuff from. Instead, you have this interface, which you can tweak to whatever you want. And yeah, that can be responsive as you want. This is already a very responsive.
Very good, very good. I mean, Peter, I think that this gives a good overview. I mean, people can really see the power of DMX again. Great that you were able to demo. Actually, I want to use this as one part of the interviews going forward, which is for the vendor to demonstrate a little bit their modules as well. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I want to start exploring just a little bit in the final stretch of our conversation here, the other facets of your involvement with DNN. First of all, is that I really want to congratulate you, to salute you for what you have done last month, and not only you, but the other team members of DNN-Connect as well. Again, I've spoken with Scott, that he was there, and he was so amazed by the whole event. I can only imagine how much work that has been for you. But before we get to that, first of all, what is DNN-Connect?
Right, DNN-Connect, thank you. DNN-Connect is a non-profit that I set up together with Philip Becker and Vicens Massanas. Basically in the wake of quite a few discussions that we had at DNN Europe events. So DNN Europe events are, let's say, small get-togethers of European DNN professionals, and we would discuss quite often, how do we move forward and organize ourselves. And it seemed that there were always two kind of opposing forces. There's a group who wants to desperately start something commercial, and there's another group of the die-hard open source people that say, no, we need to do something free for the community, etc. And I found myself more in the latter group, and I think, having observed that over 4 or 5 years, the discussion didn't really move towards let's say, a common point. At which point Philip was also playing with these ideas, and I think we just, we crossed lines at the same time and said, why not just do something and we'll see who follows. And that's basically where it set off. So beginning of 2014, I drew up some statutes to make it a legal entity in Switzerland under Swiss law, because one of my passionate points about the association is this: if people contribute or if people put effort into the community, there's always this element of like, hey, are the others pulling their weight? Am I being abused? Right? Am I the one that's making everything, doing all the work, where the others are just benefiting from this? So now that we have a non-profit organization, we could say, well, actually, you do it for this association. So any money that comes in, it goes there. Right? You do it for that. You do it for the community. That, at least for me, is something that helps in my efforts. I feel quite comfortable making a new open source module that sits under the IP of DNN-Connect and is used on the DNN-Connect site. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, and if we can get some sponsorship from people to support the association, perfectly happy. But it's not my money. It's not Philip's money. It's not Vicence's money. It's the association's money.
Got it. Okay. I do have a question on the still about the DNN-Connect. If I'm someone watching this, or actually I'm curious about that as well myself, if I'm watching this, or if I wanted to somehow contribute to the organization as well, what's your sorry, let me rephrase this. How can I, aside from coding, how could I help the organization?
Well, in much the same way as you would help any kind of community effort in DNN, which is, write. We have a very lively blog on our site. Make videos like, the stuff that you're doing is absolutely wonderful. There should be more and more content on YouTube. We hope to get more content on YouTube. I think those are the obvious channels for people who don't code to contribute to the community. The one advantage we have as an association is that our site, of course, is relatively open. I mean, there's not that many dependent bits of the site as opposed to DNN software that has their commercial product also embedded in the same site, which makes it quite hard for the community to do different things with the DNNsoftware.com site. So in essence, if you feel really passionate about, no, what our community needs, it needs something like this, right? And you thought of some concept like the other day, I tried this, which is, a database of projects and ideas and stuff, but now I can do it, right? I have this site. I don't need to ask permission from other people to install it, and the impact is quite low. So, yeah, I think that is where we offer people who are interested, who are watching this, a platform to contribute and to be visible as well.
Yeah. So for me to become a member, I'm assuming that I just register, and is that any annual fee that I would have to pay? Is that the idea as well?
Yeah. The thing is this. I mean, we're not a money-making organization. However, any association only has a legal basis if it has paying members. Otherwise, you're basically just air. You're nothing. So that is one requirement that is put on us. Like you need members. Now, one of the things we've gone and done now moving forward is that at least people going to the conference, they will automatically have their membership done for the year to come. Others can register on the site. The cost is, off the top of my head, 30 euros for a contribution, and you will be recognized, of course, as a contributing member to DNN-Connect. You will find on the site the statutes, and the statutes basically stipulate, in the statutes you will find what we're allowed to do with that money, and if we would cease to exist, what happens to that money. So in case you have any, qualms about, hey, am I paying Peter? Am I paying, who am I paying? Read it if you're interested, and you'll see what happens.
Perfect. Last question about that, and then we move on to the last topic here. But again, because it was started by by a group in Europe. I'm assuming that this is open for the entire world there. Anyone can come in, and this is not restricted to Europeans.
Yes, yes. In fact, that is actually the major driving force why it's called DNN-Connect and no longer DNN Europe. Right? We got something going with the DNN Europe group that all of a sudden started to attract attention from outside of Europe. So we started to attract people from the US and other parts that said, hey, you seem to have this really cool conferences going on. Can we join? I was like, sure. But then after a while, people like Philip took the lead on that. He said, I don't think we should call it DNN Europe anymore because geographically we're now covering the world.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for your contribution there, Peter. Again, great to have you there heading that organization. Last point here. This guy. Tell me how you came about being part of that, and what's the deal here? Tell me.
All right, so it was late last year when Sean reached out to me. He had promised Rox that there would be a new book, a new DNN Pro book, and I think it was very much time for a DNN Pro book to happen. And as he was piecing together his team of authors, he reached out to me and asked me if I could write. And off the top of my head, it's chapters 3 and 13. So one chapter is a basic platform overview. It's quite short, but it should give you an understanding of the most important terms, the glossary of like, okay, so what is a portal? What is a page? What's a tab? What is a module? What is a skin, etc. So those kind of concepts explained, and the beginning module development, which module development, of course, being my passion, is something I'd love to sink my teeth in. It's a bit daunting, like when someone comes at you, it's like, hey, we're going to write the next DNN Pro book, and would you like to do these chapters? And you're like, okay, well, that's quite a few words to write, and you ask yourself, do I have that much to tell about it? But I have written before, I did a PhD back at university, so I had to write a whole book there as well. So I thought, okay, I'll pick up this challenge. I think it's a good challenge. This is something I should do.
Perfect. Very good. Very good. Peter, that's basically it from my side. I just want to open this up for you to have any final words, anything that we haven't covered. I mean, it's yours.
All right. No, I don't have a lot to add. Just that I want to thank everyone that is watching that came to our event, and of course to tell everyone again that we're going to do this again next year, and our events keep on getting better, so it promises to be quite something. Keep an eye out for that. Yeah, I have my little business to run with my module, but I'm also putting a lot of effort into trying to grow the adoption of the platform, making sure we get a good vision moving forward with the platform. That is also why I sit on various teams at DNN. So one thing that we didn't touch on, but time eludes us at this time to delve into it. But the steering committee of DNN, so it's just a couple of people who get together to talk about the relationship between community and corporation, as well as the architecture team, which looks at the way the platform actually develops. I think that there is a lot of good stuff that is happening, and I certainly think that the people that left the conference have that perception as well. Again, to all your viewers as well, try out the new features of DNN. There's some great stuff coming, and we'll keep on building better solutions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. And again, thank you for your contribution to the ecosystem in general. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for our conference.
Thank you, Aderson.
Bye.